So welcome to part 2 of this series on restoring this little bakery or rough kitchen, and I'm going to have to do a little bit of explanation about what's going on here because I have at this point taken a Line-scribe, but I didn't film that. But don't worry, there will be some footage of line-scribing later on in this film, and the limitations and part of my decision-making process here were that the chimney breast of the bakery part stops me from having access to a couple of meters of the inside of that beam, and this building has been used in the later years for storing for housing animals, so there have been some young pigs in there who've eaten away at the wall. And the second piece of timber has quite extensive damage at the far end, so I've decided on a path that allows me to take this piece of timber out and scarf on a new piece on that, as I did in the first film on the first piece of timber, and that way I get access to both timber. So I'm now in the process of just changing the temporary foundation points in order to get that second piece of timber out, which in the end actually turned out to be quite difficult, and I did a bit more damage on those lafter heads, which was unfortunate, but there we go. It's not too difficult to repair them again. I'll glue them back up, glue and screw them back up together again, but you'll see that in a bit. That piece of wood I'm screwing on there is just to hold the third piece of timber up. That is also divided. It's two pieces of timber, and when that second piece of timber comes out, that would drop down. So I'm just holding it up to the timber above. I mean, I don't know what expressions to use here. They're called omfad. These the different layers of timber. They're like, that means like a word that means something like layers, omfad. That just doesn't mean layers, it is a special word for timber houses. Now I'm expecting to see pegs inside the wall. They're called something like, well, some people call them blindinged, which means blinds or hiddens, or dumlinged is another name for them. But as you see, boom, it pops out and there are none, which actually is wrong, because on such a long wall there should be at least one peg. To stiffen the wall. Yeah, I'm just saying that the moss is still green. I mean, it's dark inside there, isn't it? So there's no reason for it to be bleached. It's green. It's not living though, I don't think. Although I'm not sure moss actually, it's weird, isn't it? Because sometimes it's just, you know, kind of goes into a dormant state, but I'm not sure that's that kind of moss. Amazing, those nails. I don't want to brush that off really, because I'm going to use it again. I would have liked that to have just popped out really. So I'm going to make new because of the damage around these ones and because of the difficulty of doing this bit, because it's hidden from the inside. I can't get in there to do the line scribing. Combine that with the fact that these heads have been damaged. I'm going to make new heads and glue them in, well, or screw them in with a kind of you'll see later. So now I can just put this log up on the new one and fix them together and repair the end of it as well. Supposed to have just dropped out. Oh boy, that's might have to jack up here a little bit. I let the house back down again so it's as low as it needs to be. Now that the ground is frozen, it makes temporary jacking points much safer to make. I can't jack it up very much here though because there's this big chimney, although it is quite damaged already. So it'll need some repair. It's important that there's no gap here as well when you do this. Can't dare do any more than that. Damage the parts. So there's the laughter head, is the casualty. So I was obviously a bit disappointed when that happened. It wasn't intentional, but it will just be glued back on and screwed the same as the other ones, and it doesn't make it any, it's not a great deal weaker than it would be, because it's a very weak point anyway. They're supposed to be longer, those. For some reason they changed the fashion. Well, I suppose they were embarrassed by the fact that they had timber houses maybe, and they wanted them to be as small as possible. Obviously the smaller they are, the more likely they are to break. And now I've got access to this bit that was hidden. I line-scribed the parts of the timber that were visible before I took this piece out, so now I can use the marks that were made by the scribe to position the timber. And then the score lines from the tool, the Line-scribe, they show me where I have to put the timber.
just look at the score mark that is on this piece of wood here.
The scribing tool I'm using is called a meddragskniv in Norwegian, and it's adjustable. You can change the distance of the scribe that's made.
Now I can just get this piece of wood in the right position in relation to that one, and then I can do the line scribe on the inside where I couldn't do because of the stonework inside there. So I had thought that I was going to just let this cut more than I needed here and let it be drafty. But since that damage was there anyway and it needed repairing, and this piece needs another piece on top as well, so I think it's easier just to do it like this. It's worth the extra work.
The work taking out that piece of timber is weighed up by the fact that I can now do the scoop underneath this top piece of timber outside the building, standing up, instead of having to doing it lying on my back with it inside the building, which is horribly hard work.
So it's quite important to keep this vertical. If the two pieces of wood aren't vertical, you have to lift it out slightly. There's nothing wrong with having it out here either, as long as you can keep it vertical. So you keep an eye on this rather than on that. I'm just going to have to guess with the luff, because that's another thing that I can't do because of the way the house is with the stone on the inside there. I use a kind of blunt pencil for this, not a sharp one. I'm just defining the line better, and then I'm going to fill the chainsaw with petrol and cut it with the chainsaw. This chainsaw is overpowered for the job I'm using it for, and the reason for that is because it's not set up perfectly. You can't have it set up perfectly. It gets too much damage. That's why I don't bother with the symmetry as well. You know, I don't do the same amount of strokes for each one, because each one is damaged differently. They all get damaged in their own right, but sooner or later. So there's no point in trying to keep it symmetrical. But I don't want to do these very accurate work with chips. So this has hit a stone here, so all these ones on the left hand side or a nail, they've all got a little nick in them. Got to get that out, otherwise it won't cut straight. Ah, bastard. That's the point about putting your hand on this side, is that if you slip off, it stops you from cutting yourself. But actually that time I didn't. I've cut myself anyway. Luckily not very deeply, because I'm talking. Shut up. I didn't realise there was that much damage on this. Strictly speaking, I should do these ones too.
Around there. And that's my little cut.
So, I mean, it's not very deep, and that's because I have my hand here. When I've done it before, I've taken massive great chunks out of that. There are lots of scars on that knuckle. I've done it so many times. I shouldn't talk when I'm working with doing dangerous things like that. Got my nice little plaster.
The observant of you will notice that I use a very shallow angle for filing the teeth on the chainsaw, around about 25 degrees, and this shows where that really comes into its own, because working with the grain like this, ripping, it cuts much cleaner and pulls out more material than if you use the normal 30-32 degrees that you would use for cutting across the grain. But it's not true ripping, so it's not like a ripping chain, which is, I don't know, they can be down to 10 or 15 degrees, some of them. So you can see I'm very relaxed when I'm working there. It might not look it, but I'm really relaxed, and I'm just allowing the saw to do the work. I'm not running the saw at full power at all. I'm just trying to get the point where it cuts and starts to kind of bite the wood in a very smooth way. And then once I get that smooth feel in the hands, then I can go right down very, very close to the line, which minimises the handwork which is to follow. There are quite a few films on my channel of working with the chainsaws, which I've kind of done as clickbaity type things to try and get people to come and look at the channel. So if you want to see more of this kind of chainsaw work, you can watch one of those maybe. I don't want that to be too deep into the timber because that weakens the timber. But I do want to get rid of the majority of the wood there.
It's not just a case of doing it at 45 degrees, because that would cut it too deep in the middle. And that's the reason for doing more than one pass. The aim here is to split the original Line-scribe line. It's quite good to split it, because if you leave some visible line, you kind of know that you haven't cut it too wide.
I won't bother with that. There's plenty of space. Wasting energy on it. What's good about this is that you can get this nice scoop, so it doesn't rest on the top there, it rests on the point. Gives you a nice airtight bit. Now I don't really need it to be particularly airtight here because it's a cold building. Doesn't have a airtight floor or anything, so what would be the point? But there's there's no reason for not doing it the way you're supposed to do it, because you might just find it gets airtight anyway, just by default. So when you're doing a restoration like this, you end up with a very wide, it's called a meerdrag or a meerfar, which isn't ideal really. It's better to have it about 8 centimetres, but that's just how it is. It has to be that way. The reason being is it's already been done once, and so we're going deeper. We're going another 2 centimetres or a centimetre and a half deeper into the timber. If you imagine it had been a centimetre further up, then it would be 8 centimetres apart, which is what it's supposed to be. Obviously the wider it is, the more it weakens the piece of timber, so it's more likely to split outwards. Well, this is a small building with just one storey. I don't think there's much danger of that happening. You got the idea. Good, jolly good. Seems to work alright.
Cutting the new channel under the piece of timber releases some tensions that might have been present in the timber, so sometimes the timber changes shape slightly after that scoop is cut out. That happens on new timber as well.
One point on the inside there where it's a bit too high. I think that's fine. Go together nicely, that. When it's in place, get a bit of weight on it. Fine. So I'll make a new bit tomorrow for that. I've got another piece of wood that I've made ready. I'll just screw these together. Well, I can just bolt them together for the time being. But they say it's going to be snow tonight, so I hope not, because I'd like to get this back in the wall. I'm not altogether sure whether this project is going to be I'm not altogether sure whether it's going to carry on during the winter. I mean during the snow, you know. A little bit of a snow is not a problem, but if you get a lot, it can be a bit of a problem. There might be a point there in the middle that's a bit high, but I don't think it's going to be a problem. So I'll put a strap around it as well.
That shows clearly the damage on that second piece of timber that I have cut off. I'm going to replace. It's strange damage. There must have been a hole in the roof. Can't just have been the pigs eating at it. It's had some wet rot in it. We call the different layers omfar. There's another name is varv, and I think some people call it kvarv, depending on the different areas, different dialects. I'm going to have to find out. If you work with timber houses in Canada or another English-speaking country, please feel free to correct me or give me the name of what these are called in English. That would be good. So that new piece of timber there is the top of the, well, it's the rest of the piece of timber that I used to repair the first omfar, the first timber. But I'm a bit concerned. I see that it's a bit too small. It's long enough, but it's not tall enough. It's going to be 1.5 to 2 centimeters lower down once the Line-scribe has been cut. So I can see I'm just measuring the length of the scarf. It doesn't need to be quite as long as the first one, it doesn't need to be as strong. But obviously a long scarf is stronger than a short one. So as it is, I decide that I need a new piece of timber, and I'm going to go into the woods now to try and find a naturally fallen piece of spruce which has quite low humidity.
Got a couple of millstones there. Right, well, it's that tree there I'm interested in.
Thanks for watching, and I hope you come back and watch more of the series later. Goodbye.